If you are a parent with kids in youth sports or activities, you are not going to want to miss this episode.
Our motivation shouldn't be to teach our kids to become professional athletes. You look at the egos that are associated with 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old kids because their parents are feeding them this philosophy that I think is absolute garbage.
What should the goal of youth sports be at its essence?
Yeah, we're training for soccer, we're training for skiing, we're trying to better ourselves in the sport, but at the end of the day, the reason why we're doing this is because we enjoy it and we love it. And the lessons that we learn from it and what it prepares us for in real life. I think the biggest impact that we can have as parents is being involved with our kids. That's the legacy I want to leave with my kids, is be as involved and as present and as live this life to its fullest. And then B would be, don't ever tell yourself that you can't do something.
Hey, it's Sarah, and welcome to More Than Musicians. As a pianist, teacher, and the owner of one of the nation's largest music schools, I've spent the last 2 decades watching the power of music change people's lives. But one part of that story rarely gets told, and that's where faith and music collide. This podcast is where we finally get to talk about it. Here, we'll explore how music deepens worship, invites peace, and helps us feel heaven just a little bit closer. I'll be joined by musicians, experts, and friends for faith-filled conversations about the life lessons only music can teach us. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of More Than Musicians. I cannot wait for you to meet today's guest. He epitomizes the phrase jack of all trades, but is walking, living proof that with enough discipline and grit, you can truly become a well-rounded master of them all. Throughout his professional career, Andy Phillips has found himself performing at the highest level on both the slopes and in stadiums around the world. He started as a member of the U.S. Alpine ski team and later transitioned to football, where you might recognize him as the beloved captain and kicker for the University of Utah football team, later even becoming a free agent in the NFL. What many don't know is that in addition to also being an entrepreneur, an ultramarathon runner, a coach, a husband, and a very hands-on dad to 4 amazing kids, Andy is also a lifelong musician. Despite all he's involved in, Andy's been able to keep his family and his faith at the center of it all. I'm excited to dive into Andy's story and unpack the meaningful lessons he's learned along the way. If you are a parent with kids in youth sports or activities, you are not going to want to miss this episode. Andy, thank you so much for being here.
So excited to be here and talk to you about music and life.
It's going to be so good. I've been bugging you about this conversation for months. Like, I've been wanting to have this kind of in-depth convo about how we approach youth sports. You know, there's not a handbook or a manual out there for us as parents to know what to do. And, you know, I'm super invested in the whole scene of after-school activities because of the piano place. And so I'm just so excited to kind of pick your brain about all of that. But before we don't really do surface level here on More Than Musicians. And so I'm actually going to have you take us back. I want to know who Andy is. I want to know your story. You have a pretty amazing story. And so I want to get into it. Andy, where are you from?
I am from Sandy, Utah. So I grew up just around Hidden Valley Golf Course, if you know where that is. And grew up in a great area. We were one of the first houses built in that area, so I was able to explore Sandy and see Sandy a little bit differently than maybe you would now, which I think it contributed a lot to my childhood and my experiences in Sandy.
So how many kids are in your family?
So I have 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. We're all about 2 years apart. My sisters and I are 3 years apart. Well, Cammie's 3 years younger than me. Busy's about 6 years younger than me. So I'm right in the middle, which is awesome.
The middle child, yes.
The middle child. I think I had a huge advantage when it came to... I attribute a lot of my success to being the middle child because I have 2 older brothers that are also highly competitive and, teased me and pushed me to my very limits. And I think because of that, I look up to them still to this day. And I think that's a lot of the reason why I've been as successful as I have been in certain areas of my life.
I want to know what the culture was like in the Phillips home because you guys, of your siblings, you guys are all very high achieving. Will you tell us a little bit about what the culture was in the home that kind of cultivated that atmosphere. And can you tell us a little bit about your siblings? Like, we've had BYU soccer players. Like, tell us more about all of them.
Sure. Yeah. So my oldest brother, Greg, he lives in Germany. He has been in the Army. He's a neurologist. He's been kind of the head neurologist of that region. And he served a mission in Germany. And so it's been cool to watch him go back to, and we are a German family. My grandma's actually fled the Nazis, went to Canada, and eventually ended up in Salt Lake City. So we have a lot of German blood in us, and so it's been cool to see him go back to kind of the roots and back to his mission. And Steve, my brother, who's in between me and Greg, he's a teacher in the Heber Valley. Was a professional soccer player in China and in Europe and Seattle, and he's an incredible person. Had a lot of life changes over the last few years, where he is married. He's adopted two stepkids who are as much blood as any of my other nieces and nephews, and I love him and I'm proud of him. And then Cammie is a nurse, and she lives in Riverton, and she is, like me, very highly competitive, and she's very smart. Graduated from BYU in their nursing program, and she's an incredible mother. And I think of all of my siblings over the last 36 years I've been alive, she's probably my confidant, and she's helped me through a lot of things throughout the years. And then Busy played soccer at BYU, and she and I are, obviously cut from the same stone, but had a wonderful collegiate experience together, where she played at BYU, I played at Utah, and we were able to lean on each other quite a bit through those experiences and help each other, through the good and the bad. So, with all that being said, growing up in our household, we are obviously highly competitive. We love to play sports. We love to just live, whether that's in sport or hiking or getting outside. We all, a few years ago, decided, my brother was up in Seattle at the time, Greg, going through his residency, and we decided to circumnavigate Mount Rainier, which is about 98 miles and 21,000, feet of elevation. And he said, "Hey, I've got 3 days off, so we're going to do this in 3 days."
Gotta hustle.
Like, we got to go.
Yeah.
And we don't have time. We got to carry our own supplies, because a lot of times when you do that hike, you drop these caches of food and whatnot. And we just decided to hoof it and do it. And so that gives you a little look into the kind of
what fun is at the Phillips.
Well, yeah, type 3 fun
Phillips
is
family.
what they call it, I think.
That's really so cool. So tell me what your parents' role and influence was in all of this. Are your parents competitive? What's their background?
They are. They're both hyper competitive, actually. And I think we get a lot of that from them. So my dad is a BYU graduate, grew up in Provo. He's a Provo Bulldog, and graduated from BYU in Latin, and went to Harvard, and he's a Harvard attorney. Graduated with his JD from Harvard, and has been practicing law his whole life. And then my mom grew up in Draper, went to Alta High School, and she graduated as well from BYU and from Tufts University, and she has numerous master's degrees from the University of Utah, and is now finishing her PhD in comparative languages, and so I believe it's in comparative languages. She's a historian through and through, knows Latin, Greek, can pretty much give you the history of every word and root of every language. So she's a brilliant, and they both debated in high school and in college. So I think a lot of the grit that I get, and my siblings and I get is from them, and just their willingness to open their mouths when they see something that might be unjust or needs to be said.
Well, they're amazing people. I am lucky to rub shoulders with your mom's family. Some of her sisters live in my neighborhood, and I love her, and I love her sisters. They're amazing, strong, and wonderful women. I wanted to ask you, so growing up, what do activities look like for you? Were you into just sports? Like, how did they approach lessons and things like that for you?
My parents never pushed us into sports or into activities. They let us explore, which I'm super grateful for, because there were times where, like, I grew up dancing with my little sister Cammie, and danced until I was, in sixth grade, and performed the Nutcracker at school.
I had no idea. That's
I was a
awesome.
Russian dancer in the Nutcracker, and you mix ski legs with some ballet, and you get a pretty good performance. What's always been important to my parents is that we are engaged in something, and so they the one requirement was we took piano until we graduated, and that we played a musical instrument. Outside of that, they let us do whatever we wanted as far as sports or activities, and so I chose to play the violin, and my younger sister Cammie chose the cello. My younger sister Busy chose the viola, and my older brothers, Greg plays the clarinet and saxophone, and Steve played the he was more percussion, not the tuba. I want to say the euphonium.
Oh,
yes, is what he
That's
landed
way
on.
Cool.
So those were the instruments we chose, and then outside of that, it was soccer for the most part, is what we all enjoyed. And
you played soccer too,
yeah,
growing up.
Yeah, played soccer, played some lacrosse as well, and then skiing. Skiing is what we all did, and my dad got us into that, and my brothers and I we competed in it. My sisters decided not to compete, but we all, soccer, I guess, would probably be the basis of our athleticism.
It's so cool to hear. Like, I've heard until just now, I've heard all these different things, soccer, I've heard violin, I've heard all these different things that you've been a part of. But later in the story, we're going to hear that you actually played at a collegiate and a professional level in two of those sports that you haven't hardly even touched on. And I think it's cool to hear that you tried it all, and that even your dance, experience could help you eventually with your timing, your rhythm, your skiing, different things like that. Was that the case?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I attribute a lot of my success in skiing, especially in skiing, to my dance, and I'm grateful. My mom it was a time in the world, I think, where you see a young boy dancing, and you make some assumptions, right? And the fact that I got to do that with my sister, and I remember 12 years old, and I'm with a bunch of 10-year-old girls, and they're all cute, and I'm a little bit embarrassed about it, but we performed "Hit Me Baby One More Time," Britney Spears, and it was just like, it gave me all the confidence in the world, I think. And looking back on it now, after experiencing what I have in sport, I can see how that experience gave me such an advantage in the other sports that I played.
That's really cool. I want to talk to you and kind of get your opinion on natural talent versus drive. In my experience, at the piano place, I'll sometimes have parents ask me, I don't feel like my child's naturally inclined for music, or they'll say, are they really going to get better or whatnot? And I wanted to share with you, I'm going to throw a graphic up on the screen, and I'm going to share with you the graphic here in the studio. And I'm going to kind of just walk you through it really quickly. So I've got this theory, and I kind of just want to know your opinion on it. When it comes to natural talent versus drive. So imagine a quadrant. It's divided into 4 sections. They're labeled from top left, 1, 2, 3, 4. And up in the top left corner, we have someone who has a very high natural talent and a high drive. And I think that's someone that probably it describes you. You kind of had the drive, you had the talent. Then in the next box, they have the talent, but their drive is pretty low. They're not working super hard towards it. They're not super passionate about it. The bottom left, there's not a lot of natural inclination, not a lot of natural talent, but they do work hard. They have high drive, and they're aspiring to be better. And my theory is that any person that falls into category 1, 2, or 3 can become proficient, can succeed in an activity. I think the only time where I would ever tell a parent, you know what, like, this is not quite working is when there's no natural talent and there's absolutely no drive towards something. And in those cases, I felt like what's cool about it is that you can always change the drive element. You know, we can always decide to put more effort in and work harder. So I'm curious to know for you, where did you fall on this chart? And what do you think about natural talent versus drive when it comes to after school activities?
Oh, I love this quadrant. I think it's fairly accurate. I'd actually put myself as a 2. You know, natural talent, low drive. Only because, so now that my kids are in ski racing, I'm starting to get a real idea of how good I was at skiing. Mm-hmm. And that's been really eye-opening for me. And it's just been the last 3 years where I've been standing next to coaches who have said comments to me like, Max will go by or Gus will go by and they'll say, I remember watching you when you were that age and you have no idea how good you were. And so I had a lot of natural talent on my skis, to the point where, at 12 years old, I'm winning, world championships. And it's just something that, like, yes, I worked hard at it and I was competitive, but I wouldn't necessarily say I had high drive, meaning I'm living day in, day out to better myself. I was still eating really bad. Like when I was 12, I was like a big husky 12-year-old. My mom would call me as strong as an ox. My brothers would call me a refrigerator, like that's kind of so I wasn't necessarily that I had high drive. So when I was 14, after winning this world championship at 14, I break my femur up at Snowbird. I'm, skiing early season, powder day, jump a cliff, land on a rock, and my femur snaps in half. And it was at that point that I realized, okay, I can come back from this, but now I'm going to be a year behind everybody else, and I have to put in some extra work. And I think that's where I really learned, or I shouldn't say that's where I really learned. That's where learning about drive started for me. And then you could add on. I think where I really learned how to find my drive was on my mission and the experience I had on my mission. But so back to your quadrants here. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent.
No,
but,
I love it.
I agree with you. Natural talent, high drive. Those are the kids that I see in skiing or soccer, which are the two sports that I coach, that you don't have to say a word to them. They're there, they're having fun. They want to put in the work, they want to get better. And then you have those kids who are so talented and you're looking at them and you're going like, if you just had the work ethic of this kid, like you would be one of the best. And then you have those kids that don't have the talent, but have the drive. And I have a kid like that.
Yeah.
They have the heart. Yeah. And they want to get better and they have the confidence, but not necessarily the talent. Mm-hmm. And I saw so many of those kids at football, these freshmen that would come in, there would be a kid who was a walk-on and he's all of a sudden getting a starting job over a 5-star kid from, Texas or California. And you're like, well, what's the difference? Well, it's right there. You have a natural talent with low drive versus maybe not so natural talent with a really high drive.
Yeah, I can imagine as a coach, you would rather work with a high drive. It would probably be preferable to work with someone with a higher drive than a higher natural talent any day because they're in it. Yeah. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. They're focused, they're engaged. And I think where we as parents go wrong is we think that we can give our kids that drive.
Yeah.
The talent is going to be there one way or the other. There's not much we can do about that.
Right.
But as a parent, like you can't give your kid the drive. They've got to figure it out and they've got to find it. And just because a kid at 9 years old doesn't have the drive doesn't mean that in 2-3 years they find it and they excel. And so I think that's where a lot of my youth sports philosophy comes from, is like we're so caught up in this world where we want the number ones. We want natural talent, we want high drive, which is likely your professional athletes, your professional musicians, right? Those are the people that really excel at that sport or that music. And at the end of the day, a lot of times, like me, I don't think that comes until later in life. And so having the patience and understanding that you're this is a long-term development. It's not, you might have a 4 that comes into the piano place and wants to, the parents really want to push them into piano and they want nothing to do with it. But that might just be the seed that's planted for 3-4 years down the road, where all of a sudden they have some sort of drive, and then they're like, okay, I want to do this.
I'm really grateful to hear you say that. I appreciate your perspective so much. As a parent, I don't think I could have ever anticipated how hard navigating this world with, our kids and getting them to be motivated and different things are. And so it helps me to hear you say that it doesn't have to happen right away. And we're going to come back to all things youth sports, but I did want to ask you here while we are still talking about natural talent is, what do you do if you see your child gravitating towards something that they don't have a natural talent for? And I'll give you a quick example. My husband is tall, and I know that our girls are going to be taller. I've been so excited about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like we could have tennis players, we could have volleyball players, we could have, so I've kind of pushed them towards sports from a young age. I'm like, I was a more sporty, I didn't dance or anything. I did sports and music. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to do sports and you're going to be tall. It's going to be amazing. Well, my girls don't like it. They love dance. And I'm like, wait, no, not dance. Please not dance. Like the one thing I don't know how to do. We're not flexible. Like, do you know what I mean? So I've had this like little complex, and I'm kind of embarrassed to even admit that. But what would you say to a parent who has a child that's gravitating towards something that they might not have the natural genetics or makeup for?
I always follow my children's passions, whatever they might be. And you look at, like, if you follow me on social media or you know me, like, we're involved in a lot, probably too much. Megan, my wife, would tell you we're involved in way too much. But as soon as my kids express interest in something, I have the tendency to pursue that with them. And I think there's really good value in exploring something with your kids and them failing. I think that there's something really good about that. On the contrary, I also think there's something good. You see potential in your children, and you I wouldn't say push them into a sport, but you give them the option and give them the opportunity. Hey, let's try this volleyball camp, or let's try this basketball camp and see if maybe it's something that you like. I remember growing up, my mom would put us in like pottery camps over the summer. Music camps, we would do all kinds of different activities, and not because it was necessarily something that we wanted to do or even that she probably wanted us to do. But what it did is it gave us as kids the opportunity to explore something that maybe we hadn't seen before. And I think there is so much value in that. And that's why I preach multi-sport. Mm-hmm. And I sit where I do as a coach because I like to provide the opportunity for the athletes that I coach to play other sports and not have that be a detriment, where we live in a day and age where if you miss practice or you miss a game, like you will be punished even if you're 9 years old. Mm-hmm. Not to say that if a kid's missed a bunch of practices and games, there's not a better option to kind of ease them back into the sport, but I think variety is huge. And so that would be my advice to any parent that struggles with that, which I struggle with as well. Is provide the opportunity for your kids to explore. You're a parent for a reason. You see potential in your kid. Like my mom probably more than my dad. And I hate to say that because my dad was with me every step of the way through skiing. He was my agent with football. He was the one I went to before every football game, and he had this this phrase to me that just really calmed my nerves. And but even more than my dad, my mom saw that and provided the opportunities, and I think that that's huge.
I like your advice to expose them to everything, but then to follow their lead. And I think I need that. I need that advice. So I really appreciate that. I want to get back to your story. Sorry, we keep getting sidetracked. I have a feeling we're going to anyway, but I want to get back to your story because it is truly so remarkable. You were obviously a promising skier. And how did that interests take over your other interests? And then will you just tell us the story of like how you got into being on the U.S. ski team?
Sure, yeah. So my dad started me, I started skiing when I was 2. And I had 2 older brothers to chase around the mountain. So like huge advantage already. And they're both great skiers. We go and ski every year together. And so I started racing when I was 5, and I was really good, really fast, just naturally had no fear and naturally could roll my skis up. And so I was fast. And that kind of carried me through till I was 12. That's when I realized, like, you are very good at this sport. Like, you are top 1% of this sport. And we went up to Whistler for what at the time was, it's called Whistler Cup, but it was essentially world championships where you have kids from Japan and Norway and Germany, all these great ski nations come together and race. And at that time, you've got to realize that most of your races are regional. So you're racing against kids in the Intermountain, Sun Valley, Jackson Hole, Park City, Snowbird. And so this is your real first exposure to somewhere else outside of the U.S., even outside of the region. And so I went up there and won that race. And I'm standing on the podium next to 2 Norwegians who were 2nd and 3rd, which, by the way, I served my mission in Norway, so there's some irony there. But and they're both taller than me, and I'm on the first place podium. And so it was just, I was like, wow, I'm good at this. And that carried me forward to till when I was 16 and I qualified for the U.S. ski team. And like I shared earlier, there was a hiccup in there with breaking my femur.
Yeah.
And kind of trying to navigate my way, recovering after that. But made the U.S. ski team. Made this U.S. ski team has a development team, and then they have kind of their ABC team, which is their professional team. And so as a D team member, I qualified for the C team. I was top 5 at Junior World Championships, and then it was at that point I had a decision to make. Do I serve a mission or do I continue on this pathway of skiing?
That's so you're 16. So how did you navigate that with school? Like, were you missing school? Did you have to pull out of school? Did you do online? How did that work?
So a little bit of both. I mean, I started missing school and realized soon that wasn't going to work. And so I transferred to a school. I ski raced at Romark, and Romark is the ski program for Roland Hall, St. Mark's.
Okay.
And so I did a year at Roland Hall, St. Mark's, where most of the academics are done before noon, and then after noon you can go up and train. And it was at that point I realized I probably need to get through school, and so I did my senior year at the Winter Sports School in Park City, and I basically went between my junior and senior year, had like 2 weeks off, and started school in April, finished in November, and graduated in November. And so I had the whole winter off and could focus on
cool.
on skiing and on my craft. Yeah.
What would you say? Because I've seen your boys and I feel like they have little pieces of your no fear. Like, compared to my kids, truly, like, they just have a different level of play, and I love it. I love watching it. And I feel like probably your parenting, where mine might be a little bit like, hey, be careful, because I think I have a lot of fear, but it's cool to hear that you didn't. And it's cool to see how your kids get to enjoy life probably even fuller because they don't have someone hovering over them all the time. But I wanted to ask you, how did you like hone in your mental toughness to compete at such a level? Do you remember any experiences, or was it difficult for you to get mentally, like, I think about certain sports, like the mental game is more than half of it. What was the mental game like for skiing?
That's a great question. I think having routines is very important, and just knowing your body, knowing how you warm up, knowing your mind, and also trying not to make more of a moment than it is. I think we get caught, especially nowadays. Everything's televised, everything's recorded. You get so caught up in the moment that you forget to have fun, and that was the message my dad would give to me. So we would do our Ute walk. Now we're jumping back to football. Sorry, switching sports, but we would do our Ute walk 3 hours before the game, and I'd walk into the stadium, and then my dad would be there, just outside of the stadium, and through the bars, and he'd be like, "Hey, how are you feeling? What's going through your mind?" And we'd have a conversation. And he would always just say, "Andy, this is a game. Go have fun. Just remember that. Go have fun." And like that was what I think that I attribute a lot of my success at Utah to that mindset. And so that's what I try and do with my kids is remember that, like, yeah, we're training for soccer, we're training for skiing, we're trying to better ourselves in the sport. But at the end of the day, the reason why we're doing this is because we enjoy it and we love it. And the lessons that we learn from it and what it prepares us for in real life, which is, like in skiing, you have to handle the cold elements. You have to be prepared. You can't forget your gloves. You can't forget, you have to have responsibility. And so I try and remember that. It's hard because there's a competitor in me. Yeah. And so you say like, yeah, my kids are maybe a little more fearless. I mean, some of that might be because I'm pushing them. And part of that also is I remember skiing with my dad and watching him ski, and skiing with my brothers and watching them go off of jumps and cliffs and do things that in my mind were very fearful, and going, okay, if he can do it, like there's no reason I can't. And so I've tried to create that same atmosphere and environment for my kids where I put them in positions to succeed in skiing, take them off of jumps or cliffs that are big enough, but maybe aren't going to, they're not going to break their leg. And just create a safe environment where they can explore and become their best selves. That's my total motivation with sports is I don't necessarily want a professional skier or a professional soccer player, but I want a kid who can go up on top of a cliff, look down it, assess it, and say, okay, this is something I want to push myself off of, or maybe this is something that I want to do at a later time. And if they can make that decision, I'm proud of them either way, whether they decide to go off or not.
That's really cool. It makes me think of this in like the parallel to life. So we just got a new puppy, which I know you did too. We're both in the puppy life right now. And we've sent this dog to go to like puppy school. And when we got to go pick the dog, he was there for 8 days. We went to go pick him up. And we got to see all the things he'd been learning. And basically what we concluded is that while he's eating, they basically are just like introducing him to loud noises, pushing him off ledges. Like basically they're just giving him experience with opposition. So, and that's basically, they say a confident dog is a happy dog. It's not going to bite. It's not going to be aggressive. And so when you're saying that, I keep thinking about how like in life, we can just give our kids these opportunities to make the decisions, to do hard things, to fail, to get up, to fall, to, all these different things to learn, to ultimately help them become strong, confident humans outside of the, arena, the slopes, whatever. I love that. I wanted to go back really quick to your like pregame ritual. Was your dad there every time?
Yeah.
That is so cool that he could take the time and be there for you. And I'm sure that was super calming. So with music, there's been a really big need for like routine, like you said. And one of the things that I do that I wanted to share was there's a scripture, and I'm not sure if you've heard of it before, but it's 2 Nephi 32:9, and it says, "But behold, I say unto you that ye must pray always and not faint, that ye must not perform anything unto the Lord, save in the first place ye shall pray unto the Father in the name of Christ, that he will consecrate thy performance unto thee, that the performance will be for the welfare of thy soul." So is there any other part of your routine that you would do, whether in skiing or in football or in music, that you would be able to ground yourself before a big event?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, as you were asking me that question, it made me think about the parallel between performing on a violin, performing in a ski race, performing, on a football field. All very similar, despite being so different. And a lot of my success in football is because of the way that I was able to compose myself while skiing. And a lot of my composure in skiing, I learned from learning how to compose myself on my violin. And so you talk about, routine. pre-game, not even pre-game, but like pre-performance routine is very similar across all three, where, I believe in the power of prayer. And so prayer is always a part of that. And that's usually the very first thing I would do. And it's not, hey, pray I'll make this field goal, or pray that I won't mess up, but it's, help me be composed and perform to the best of my abilities. And then after that, I have a breathing routine where I, like with kicking field goals, I set up my kicking tee or my sticks on the sideline as I'm kicking into the net prior to going out on the field. And I walk my steps off, and I get my breathing under control, and then I just kind of clear my head and go. And it's the same thing with my violin. You might think, here's a guy who's kicked in front of hundreds of thousands of people in Michigan, or flies down the slopes at 80 miles an hour. But the second I pick up my violin, like, my nerves are high, and I'm shaking, and that's emphasized on a violin because you're higher strings, and any little shake, especially if you cake some rosin on there, everything comes through. And so you have to learn how to control your breathing, and you have to learn how to control your nerves. And that's not something, admittedly, I'm very good at on my violin, but I've had to learn how to do that and understand that, hey, you have to walk through this routine and make it the same for everything you're doing in order to find that composure. I'll share a story with you. When I got cut from the Bears, I wasn't kicking a field goal. I wasn't performing in anybody. I was about to walk in to meet with Coach Fox, and had a good idea that he was going to cut me. And here I had worked, long time to get to that position, had performed well in fall camp, and felt like I had the edge on the guy I was competing against for the job. And I walk in, and Coach Fox says, hey, appreciate all you've done. NFL is a hard league to stay in, and you're a talent, and I hope that you keep, going for it, but we're going to let you go. And walking into that room, I had to go through the same routine. I got my breathing under control. I kind of grounded myself and made sure that I was mentally and physically, where I needed to be, and then I walked in. And so it's those things that you learn from a variety of different activities. I attribute a lot of it to music, but that's why I'm such a proponent of multi-sport, especially. I mean, that's probably what I've been loudest, but multi-activity, we can call it, because there's so much crossover, and there's so much you learn about handling life from these things. And if you don't give opportunity for that, in my opinion, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so if my kids, if I relate this to my own kids, Megan and I try and provide as many opportunities as we can for our kids to fail, and our kids to lose, and our kids to win, and have to learn all of the different, lessons that you learn going through that, all while at the same time not basing, not impacting their, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this, not linking their success in that sport, winning, to their self-worth. And that's where we fail, I think, as parents in sport especially, is instead of getting in the car after a game, after a win, or even after a loss, and being a dad, all of a sudden we turn into a counselor.
Yeah.
You missed that run, like you should have put that away, this and that. And I think that's so detrimental to the mental game of our kids. And so I try and preach, I try and preach that where I can.
I am very much at fault for doing that exact thing. And I want to go back before I have so much to talk to you about, youth sports. Like we are going to get into that, but I want to just go back really quick. I like how you said that you're not, doing your routine, asking God help me make this field goal. When I'm, anytime I play the piano, I always read this one scripture that I just read. And then I ask for two things. One, that I will be able to play to the best of my ability that I have practiced for, right? For the effort that I've put in, please help me play it that good. And then I also ask that I will just be able to have the Spirit with me, and that I'll be able to invite the Spirit into the room, and that I will then consecrate it to be for the welfare of everybody. I have this prayer that I say anytime. And I loved how you said that translates to other hard experiences. When you're getting cut from a team, when you're having to have these hard conversations, I always think it's fun because I've finally figured out how to master my nerves, I feel like, in music. But whenever I go on camera, whenever I do the news, whenever I do a podcast, I get that same like physiological reaction, which for me is like hives on my neck and a shaking foot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it sounds like for you mastered those nerves on the ski slopes and probably in your football, but then music would sometimes bring that out for you. And it's good. I feel like it makes me feel alive when that happens. I'm like, I can still feel it. But I want to talk to you about, you said with ski team, you had to decide if you were going to go on an LDS mission or if you were going to stay and compete. And so can you kind of walk us through your decision there?
Yeah, sure. I was pretty young when I decided to get my patriarchal blessing. I was about to turn 15.
And for those that don't know what that is, will you explain?
Yeah, so in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, usually before you serve a mission or before you get married, you receive or you ask for a blessing from your patriarch. A patriarch is in each stake of the church, and that patriarch, their entire calling is to give you a blessing. And we don't record blessings in our church except for our patriarchal blessing. And the patriarchal blessing is special because it gives you information about your lineage and gives you counsel specific to you that you use for your life. And it's a powerful blessing. And this patriarch takes, fasts and prays for days to feel inspired and be inspired as to what they need to say to you. And again, the patriarch's acting in our belief on behalf of our Heavenly Father, and is giving this blessing as if it's coming directly from God. And so it's a powerful blessing. And mine has guided me throughout my life. I'm so grateful for it. And there's a specific part of my blessing that talks about my sports and talks about the opportunity that I have to serve a mission, and the responsibility that I would have to serve a mission, and that I would be called to a specific place on earth prepared for me. And so when I was, 16, 17, having all of the success in ski racing, ranked second in the world, and just, really Olympics in the next couple of years, it was a really hard decision for me to make, and not necessarily a decision I wanted to make. But that phrase from my blessing, my patriarchal blessing, kept coming back into my mind. And so I prayed about it for weeks. And I remember I was going down to Salt Lake City, where my dad's office was, and we were going to walk through the pros and cons of serving a mission. What would be the impact on my ski career? What would be the impact on my life? And I left his office after we had made this list, and I-80 was closed. And so I was like, hey, I'm just going to zoom on a bunch of back streets and make my way home. And I turned down the street in South Salt Lake, and on the street, and it's a cold, stormy day, our two missionaries walking down the street, which you don't see very often in Utah. Mm-hmm. Most missionaries are in a car in the winter. And it just hit me, hey, this is something you need to do. And so I felt a very powerful confirmation that I needed to serve mission, and it was time for me to do that. And so I told my parents that decision. They were very supportive. I told the U.S. ski team that decision, and it was a very mixed support. as you can imagine.
I'm sure they wanted you to stay. You were getting medals for them.
Yeah, well, that, and at that high level of sport, when you're a professional athlete, it's very hard to leave. It's very hard for others to see why you might leave that. You've worked your whole life to get there. Why would you leave now?
Yeah.
That's a stupid decision. Yeah, in your
life,
arguably your
career.
prime. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was eye-opening to me who my true supporters were, I think, during that time. And so made that decision, get my calling, and I'm called to serve in Norway, which is the ski capital of the world. I doubt that the leaders of the church knew much about my background in ski racing and in skiing. And so that was very inspired, and went and served the Norwegian people for 2 years and learned about their culture, learned their language. I have a lot of Norwegian ancestry, so it was very cool for me to be there. And some of my dearest friends are from that time in my life that I still keep in touch with. And so it was a very cool experience. Now here's probably the coolest part of this. I get home from my mission, and I'm not given a spot back on the ski team, but I'm given an opportunity to compete with the U.S. ski team. And that started with a camp, like 2 weeks after I got home. And so I get back on my skis, haven't skied in 2 years, and decide or get on my skis, and I'm skiing as fast, if not faster, than a lot of these peers of mine that had been racing for the last 2 years. And the strength was there, the speed was there, and it was just, again, another, I guess for me, probably more validating than anything of knowing that I made the right decision. Just
a little blessing that came from it is that you could still hang after.
Yeah, could still hang. And I look back on it now, and I've had comments like, yeah, you missed out on Vancouver Olympics, which you could have raced in, and this and that. But the experience that I had, the lessons I learned, the friendships, the eternal friendships that I made, are way more valuable to me than any sort of Olympic participation.
This episode was made possible by The Piano Place. I can promise you that I will never run an ad on this show that I don't wholeheartedly believe in. This is one service I can confidently put my name behind. When I started The Piano Place 10 years ago, I had no idea just how deeply music would impact people. I've watched shy kids find their confidence, teens discover an emotional outlet, moms rediscover their connection to themselves, and families strengthen their homes through music. At The Piano Place, we match every student with a teacher who fits them, their unique personality, and their goals. Everything from our recitals to our state-of-the-art studio locations are designed to help inspire creativity from the moment our students walk in the door. Our tagline, Making More Than Musicians, gives insight to our main mission, which is to help kids learn to love and stick with lessons, all while discovering the great life lessons along the way. With 12 locations across Utah, it's never been easier to get started. You can visit our website, thepianoplaceutah.com, and if you mention More Than Musicians, you will get your first lesson free. You can call us at 801-893-2417. That's 801-893-2417. Give us a call today and we'll get you taken care of. I wanted to go back really quick when you talk about that experience of seeing the missionaries, that feeling that you describe, we in the church, we often call it feeling the spirit or a spiritual experience. And I want to ask, I ask almost all my guests this, and I love asking this question, but what does the spirit feel like to you?
Oh, put me on the spot.
I know. Sorry, I should have prepped you for that one. I mean, it's described in so many ways. It's described as a warm feeling. It's described as an illumination of thought, of clarity of mind, of peace, of hope, of burning in the bosom. It's described in so many different ways. But I just love to ask how you personally have experienced this spirit.
Many of those ways, I think. Clarity of thought is huge. Where I've had questions, I've questioned certain things. I've been struggling with, direction, and all of a sudden I get a very clear picture of what I need to do. That's one way I felt the spirit. The other is, a very warm confirming feeling that just hits you and you're like, oh, yes, okay, that's great. In music, it's probably more emotional to me in music than anything. I love to listen to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, or the Tabernacle Choir on
a Temple Square. Tab
excuse me.
Cats, yes.
Or Jenny Oaks Baker,
Yeah.
And it just, the feelings I get from hearing the combinations of melodies and harmonies and it's just, you're like, holy cow, this is a slice of heaven. To be honest, I get a very similar feeling when I'm sitting on a chairlift with my kids and it's snowing and it's quiet and it's too cold to have any sort of phone distractions or any other distractions, and I'm just sitting there and we're enjoying the moment, whether that's laughing or, I've got my arm around one or they're wearing my mittens because their hands are cold or whatnot. And I find that spiritual, the feeling of the Spirit in many different forms, but it's always the same feeling. Whether it hits me with clarity or whether it's chills or emotion, it's always the same feeling. And it's been consistently that way since I was a kid. And so that's, to me, how I know for a surety that that's what I'm feeling, and that it's not some sort of just erratic emotional reaction.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to insert in this story and figure out, when did you meet Megan? Like, where does Megan, your wife, come into the picture? You're home from a mission. You're re-entering the ski scene. Where did you meet Megan?
So I had met Megan a year before my mission, actually.
Okay.
She had just turned 16. She and I grew up in the same ward.
Okay.
Neighborhood. We were backdoor neighbors almost. And I knew her older sister and her younger sister, but I didn't really know Megan existed until I was asked to join my dad and be a home teacher to her family. And so in the church we have we call it ministering now, but essentially you're assigned families that you check on every month to make sure that they're physically and spiritually well and see if there's any help that they need. So my dad and I were assigned to be the Geese home teacher, and I showed up Sunday with my dad, and Megan walked up from spring cleaning her closet, and she was in these sweats, Victoria's Secret sweats that had pink, on the back.
Yes, I remember
on the bottom.
Ones, yes.
And she caught my eye, and I'm like, holy cow, this is she's beautiful. I don't think she would ever date me because I'm her home teacher, and she thought I was some I don't know what. You'll have to ask Megan what she thought I was. I had long hair. I was like ski bum, but she for some reason thought my family was a very staunch, strict family. Anyways, my mom called her mom and said, "Hey, Andy, I'd like to take her out. Can you get her number?" And we set up a date, and it was pretty magical from the first date. We went up to Park City. We rode the Alpine slide, had some Mexican food, and it was awesome. And so I dated her for about a year before I left on my mission, and she changed my life. I mean, a lot of the reason why I was prepared to go on a mission was because of her and her example. And about 10 months into my mission, was it 10 months? I got an email. No, sorry, it wasn't 10 months. It was like a year and 10 months or so. I got an email from her that she was dating a BYU football player and didn't want much to do with me going forward.
Did she Dear John you?
So she Dear John me.
Megan!
I actually got it on the night of Halloween. And
this must be a joke.
It was dark. It was a dark time. But I had a lot of confidence. I knew that she was the one, and so I was pretty optimistic and wrote her a very nice letter back and just said, I'm going to wait it out. I think things will work out the way they're supposed to. And they ended up breaking up before I got home, and it all worked out. We dated for another year and got married.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
One fun part of this story that I want to interject is that Megan was a Cougarette for BYU's Cougarettes. And what's so cool about that is it is so highly competitive to make that team. And so it's cool to see you guys both kind of performing at the top of your, discipline, at the top of your fields. How important was finding someone with a drive like Megan's to you when you were looking for, a partner?
It was huge. I think even more important than the drive was just the values and Megan I can't even put it in words. Like, Megan has the best heart and the best intentions, and she's super intelligent, and she's highly competitive. She has a ton of drive. Talk about, it's crazy. Everyone looks at our family and thinks that I'm the one that's, so driven and so athletic. And it's you clearly don't know Megan. President of the Cougarettes, danced her whole life, straight A student. 8 months ago decides that she wants to start playing piano, and she is just killing it. And she, bless her heart, she can't sing to save her life, but she's one of those quadrant 3 where, well, she has a lot of natural talent as well, but when it comes to music, her drive, her ability to better herself is it's so superior. So her values, her testimony, her faith, she's so grounded in who she was. That's what really drew me to her. Was in high school, there was no, she was never insecure about who she was, what kind of a person she was going to be. She always just knew, she's Megan. She's, I can't even put it into words. Hopefully I've been able to articulate it a little bit.
It was been really fun Megan is one of my dearest, closest friends, and I love her so much. It was fun to see her perform in the last Piano Place recital, and I love her confidence up on the stage. She participated with a lot of our kids, and I just loved her confidence in doing that. But I think it's a testament to the fact that Megan's always trying to be a little better and to grow. One fun fact about you and I is that we share nephews, and Megan's sister, Macy, is married to Brady's brother, Braxton. And so Macy and I are sister-in-laws. And we recently, as a family, it's the connection that makes us family in a way. We had an amazing experience watching, sorry, I already knew I was going to cry about this, but watching Megan get to carry Macy's and Braxton's baby for them. With Macy's permission, I will share that she has not been able to carry her own children. And so she knew for a long time, and I think maybe Megan knew for some time, that would be an opportunity that she might have. And so I was hoping that you could tell us the story of the surrogacy experience from your perspective as Megan's husband.
Sure. Gonna get me emotional here too.
Sorry, I already knew I was going to be teary about it. It's so special.
No, it was an incredible experience. As you mentioned, as Macy found out that she was unable to carry her own children, Megan made a decision right then that she was going to carry for her sister at some point in their lives, and so it's been a non-negotiable for Megan, and it was something that when we were dating. Or when we were married, we discussed as well. And it was never a question in my mind that it was something that Megan would do and that I would fully support. And we feel very blessed. We have twins. And we feel like there was some divine intervention in having twins because of the plan for Megan to carry Covey. And so in 2018, we found out, we were like, hey, let's try for our third. They're eventually down the road, this is going to happen. Megan will be a gestational carrier. And so let's kind of try and knock our kids out, as bad as that sounds. And we were blessed to have twins, and we found out it was boy, girl. And we both felt like our family was complete at that point after having Leo and Lucy. And it was at that point that Megan and Macy worked together and for the right timing on when it was to carry Covey. And so, I love kids. I could have 10 kids. You know, I'm obviously not carrying the kids, so it's super easy for me to say, but I love kids. And so to have the opportunity to have a special connection with one of my nephews has been really cool. And I like to say, and I like to tease him, even though he can't understand it. Like I've been wrestling with him since he was in the womb. You know, I'd roll over and cuddle with Megan, and there he is, you know, kicking my hand off of her stomach, and you know, sleeping in my bed for 9 months. And you know, he's such a little punk, but it was cool. Despite this the sacredness and the special experience that it was, I would be lying if I didn't say it was hard. You know, it was very hard to watch my wife carry a baby that eventually she would have to give away, in a sense.
Yeah.
And in that same breath, you know, I can only imagine how hard it is for Macy to watch somebody carry a baby, you know, knowing that that's an experience that she couldn't have. And so I think that in between all of that, there's a very special closeness that was formed between Macy and Megan, in the sense that, you know, Macy could be there with Megan through every appointment, and could see the struggle with Megan that maybe she hadn't seen with the other carrier that carried her other children. And we look back on it now, and I think the coolest part of all of this was the second that he was born. And Macy's not one to really like the dramatic part of birth, you know, watching her sister there, you know, in stirrups, and not really in stirrups, but, you know, having the baby, I think, and seeing the graphicness of it is not like Macy, I think, would have been fine. Like, hey, just let me know when he's here. I'll step in the room.
Step in.
But we had talked about it and said, Macy, Braxton, like, you guys, let's all be in there together.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to have your face right in the way, but like, experience that. And as soon as Covey came out, and you could see his face, and you could see Macy and Braxton on his face, you know, Megan and I both had just such a strong confirmation of like, this, look at this beautiful child that genetically, of course, is Macy and Braxton. Because you say Megan carried a baby for her sister, and everyone's like, oh, well, is it your egg, or is it, you know, this or that? Well,
and Macy and Megan couldn't look more alike anyway.
I know, right?
They are twins anyway, but it's completely genetically Macy and Braxton's baby.
Yeah, and you can see it. It looks just like her other kids.
Yeah.
And you just, there was such a strong spirit at that moment of like, here we are connected in such a weird way, right? But what a beautiful way to be connected in this day and age, where we have the opportunity and the technology and the science to be able to bring this beautiful kid into the world. And what a sacrifice from Megan, and what a sacrifice from Macy. And I think the collective sacrifice from both of them, you know, Braxton and I are both just kind of sitting back going, we've married some of, you know, God's choicest daughters, and we're so grateful for that.
Yeah, they're amazing. I think, I watched it all, you know, so it's tender to me because I have so much love for both Megan and Macy. I cry on every episode, so I'm so sorry, but it always gets me. I think how special, I know Megan's pregnancies are really hard, and so I think how special a sacrifice, knowing that she's going to have a hard pregnancy, to offer that. And then I think too, from Macy's perspective, it might, like for me, it would be hard to see someone so close to me get to have that intimate experience of carrying my baby. And Macy handled that with so much grace, and Megan handles herself with so much grace. And it just speaks so much to the type of people they are. But I was so grateful to be able to witness and now love on that sweet little cubby boy he really is so special. And when you were talking about the twins, so Megan, myself, and Macy all had twins in 2018. And that was a wild, wild year. But I had never thought before about the timing of that and how you getting twins, you were the only one that got spontaneous twins. Macy and I both had used fertility treatments to get our twins, but yours were spontaneous. And I think, hearing you say that the timing of that was kind of divine, that's pretty amazing. And that's so special.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, Megan's pregnancies are really hard.
Yeah.
Not that having twins, makes it really a 2-for-1, because it's harder, but it allowed, I think I don't want to speak for Megan, but I think it gave her, instead of 5 pregnancies, she was able to bring 5 children with 4. And that's big, because she's sick all the way until she delivers. Yeah. And I think Covey was, besides like the treatment, the fertility treatments before and prepping her body to carry, that was probably the easiest pregnancy, and not that it was easy, but it was a huge blessing. And I think she was able to enjoy that. And I think that's what makes Megan's connection with Covey so special is, like, our kids were great, but Max was the first, and that's what, really introduced her to the pains of giving birth and carrying a kid. And Gus was fairly straightforward. And then the twins, it was a different experience. Mm-hmm. And Covey was one where I think she could really focus after those 3, she could really just focus on, 4. I have 4 kids, not 3. After those 4, she could really just focus on knowing it's her last pregnancy and knowing the power of that act, and really enjoy it to the fullest. She's
so awesome. And it's a beautiful thing to watch the connection that you guys have with Covey. It feels less of a nephew and more, it's a special place between a child and a nephew, I feel like, is what Covey probably is to you guys. And I think that's so special. So thank you so much for being willing to be vulnerable and share.
Well, and I'll add one more thing. I feel that special connection with Macy. I mean, I've known Macy since she was, I think, 10 years old. Did I get that right? Probably about 10 years old. And so she's always been more than just a sister-in-law. I mean, she's always been like a little sister to me. I have a very special connection with her. She went to bat for me when Megan wrote me off on my mission. She's always had my back. And so this experience with her and seeing how she's carried herself, knowing the pain that she feels inside or has felt inside in the past, not being able to carry herself, and to see the way that she's walked through this experience has been so cool. And I just, I love her a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I feel the same about her, and feel super lucky that I got her as a sister-in-law. She and Megan, they're incredible. So Cindy and Gary Gee, you've raised some incredible kids. We'll give Cindy a shout out. She'll maybe enjoy that. We need to talk about how you transitioned from skiing to football, because that's a hole in this story that we need to get back to. So you, even when you were with Megan, you're home from your mission, you're skiing. Pick us up from there.
Yeah, so I got home from my mission. I raced for 2 years afterwards. And the landscape in skiing had changed quite a bit on my mission. It was 2008 financial crisis had happened. There was a lack of funding. You could make quite a bit of money in ski racing prior to 2008, and after the financial crisis, it definitely hit the industry pretty hard. And the other thing that changed was a lot of the technology in the skis, and the way that, like, slalom, for example, which was my best event prior to my mission, used to be set at about 12 to 14 meters per gate, 11 to 14 meters per gate, which is the distance between the gates. When I came home from my mission, it had shrunk to about 9. And so it was a bit of a different event. I mean, you went from being able to, like, if you could put it into the fall line and pretty much send it, and you had really good rhythm, like you were fast. And it turned into more of like whoever was quickest off of their feet, and it wasn't quite as pretty, in my opinion. And so, anyways, it was a bit of a different sport, and so I wasn't enjoying it quite as much. I was still pretty good, but I wasn't quite as I wasn't excelling like I was before my mission. And so the combination of that, I felt like there was a bit of an uphill battle with the politics involved in ski racing, and opportunities may have been withheld from me a little bit because of, coaches didn't feel like I was ready or prepared because I had served a mission and was out for 2 years. And that's fair. I don't blame them for that. And so I hurt my back early season. It was like early November, and had a whole winter. Megan and I were married, had kind of a whole winter to reassess and look at the big picture and really evaluate if this was the route I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And so after considering all of the factors, I decided to retire and go to school. And so I went to Westminster. Westminster and the US Ski Team have a grant, a program, and so I was able to do a lot of my undergraduate studies through Westminster. And then the prior year, November, I'm watching the Utes, and I'm watching their run towards a Pac-12 championship, and I'm watching some special teams plays that weren't great, and I'm like, I can do that. Like, I could go and kick. I really want to play soccer. I wanted probably to go play soccer at Westminster, if I'm being honest with you, but I was like, I can kick. So I went out and we had a turkey bowl with my brothers and my cousins, and after that, it was at Alta High School, and after that, my brothers and I were kind of sizing each other up, kicking field goals, seeing who could go the deepest. And I was like, you know what, I can do this. And so I had a good buddy at the time who was all in on it. He was a big Utes fan, and he was like, dude, let's film you through the winter and send film up to Utah. And so that's what we did. We were scraping snow off of Alta High School football field, and I was kicking field goals. And anyway, sent the film up, and the coaches got back to me and said, hey, we'll give you an opportunity to walk on this summer, and we'll watch you kick. And if we think you are worth anything, we'll give you a roster spot in the fall. And so that all happened, and I find myself playing football, a sport that I never played.
I was going to ask, had you ever played before?
Never in my life.
You were just a soccer player, so you knew you had like the chops as far as kicking.
I was a soccer player, I was a musician, I was a ski racer, so I knew I had the leg strength, and I knew I had the composure to put it all together.
Wow.
And so that was kind of a perfect storm and a perfect combination. So I redshirted my first year and really learned the ins and outs of football. You know, what are all the rules of special teams? What is expected of me as a kicker, and what is the dynamic here on the football team? Like, how do I fit in, and can I really make this work? And I remember after the fall season of my redshirt year, Megan was like, "What are we doing?" You know, and I was kind of the same way. I'm like, "What am I doing?" Yeah, I'm a walk-on. Like, I'm playing scout team linebacker and scout team kick return, and I'm just getting blasted by these dudes who are, you know, just massive. And I was like, Megan, look, like, let's just see it through the next fall camp, and if it doesn't work out, like, I can walk away, whatever. So Utah recruits, you know, a junior college kicker who's very good, and there's another freshman out of high school that's really good, and we all go into fall camp and are competing for the starting job. And it was at that point where I'm like, okay, like we were talking about earlier, I'm saying prayers of like, let me perform to the best of my abilities. You know, if the opportunity comes for me to make a positive impact on this program and be an example and, you know, have success, like, that's what I'm here for. That's what I want. And I had a very successful fall camp, and I find myself walking or running out of the tunnel to play Utah State in my very first football game ever. And it was probably the coolest first football game you could ever dream of. First field goal is a 45-yarder. And I'm kind of looking at coach like, are you serious? Like, of course I've made big kicks in practice now before, but like here I am going out to kick a 45-yarder in a tight, like rivalry in-state game and drain it. Like, I mean, it would have been good from 80 yards because my adrenaline was just so high.
Just so high. I can only imagine.
It was crazy. And so I'm stoked. I'm like, I just made my first kick. It was deep. And I run over to the sideline, like expecting the coaches to be all stoked. And of course, they've already moved on to the kickoff and they're like, hey, we're going for our surprise onside kick. And I'm like, what? So like, I go from kicking a field goal to now the very next play. We have this play where I essentially, I mean, it's a soccer move. I place the ball low on the ground with a spiral spin and it goes 10 yards and then I'm supposed to jump on it and totally surprise, the other team and we get the ball back. And so I do that and we recover it and then I go on to kick 2 more field goals that are the difference in the game. And it was just, Megan comes down and she's like what just happened? I'm like, I have no idea what just happened.
That's sweet though.
It was euphoria and it was a very cool experience. And it, like, to be honest with you, it gave me the confidence to go forward and have a lot of success.
It's so cool. What did you love about being part of a team? Like you'd been a skier, which is such an individual sport. It feels like, I know you're part of a team, but it feels more internal, like your performance is your own. What did it feel like to be on a team and why did you love being on that U of U football team?
Well, to be honest, it's still pretty individual. I mean, you go out there and of course you're dependent on your line and a good snap and a good hold, but like at the end of the day, if the ball's on the ground, it's up to you to get it through the uprights. But with that being said, I'm now on a team where I have teammates who have fought their tails off all game to get us to the 30-yard line to kick a field goal. And they've put their body on the line and they've been going head to head against, the biggest dogs in the world. And like to now put that on the shoulders of a kid who's never played football before to put it through and win the game, or put us up 3 points, like that was a very cool dynamic that I live for that. I mean, this more than anything. To be honest, the most intense moment I've ever had in my life was not kicking a field goal in front of 100,000 fans. It was making sure that I got right yours and Macy's gender reveal, that I didn't mess that up. Because,
you nailed it.
Because no one knew what it was. I had 4 of those flares, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, I've got to line these up so they're right. Make sure they're the right genders. Make sure they're not mixed up.
That would have been too funny.
That was the most nervous I've ever been. So, but back to your question, having. I love that responsibility, and that was something that that I lived for. And so knowing that it was going to come down to a kick and it was going to be on my shoulders, like I loved that moment and had learned to love that. It wasn't something I always loved, but had learned to love that. And so having the opportunity to succeed and, kind of validate all the work that my teammates had done was super fun.
That's cool. And I remember hearing about your experience as a kicker kind of through Megan's lens sometimes. And I mean, there was some stress, right? There was some pressure, to perform and different things like that. Can you think of an example where, it wasn't what's the opposite of the euphoria you felt in the first game? Like, were there lows that you experienced as the kicker or times where you felt like, holy cow, like I have to make this happen?
Yeah, I remember, like one of the lowest times in my career, I missed an overtime field goal against Arizona State in overtime. And it was tough because I had made 3 field goals that game, long ones, and it was a low. I think it was 16-16 or something like that. I'd made I'd made 3 field goals, and we had scored a touchdown, and so had Arizona State. And so I'm like, hey, a huge reason we're in overtime is because I put a 50-yarder through the uprights, and I went out there in overtime, kicked the field goal. Arizona State called a timeout, but I had kicked it and missed it. And so then I'm like, okay, I just missed that right. Like, what's going on? And got into my own head. Went out for the next one and missed it left. And I got a lot of support from my teammates. Like, my teammates came in the room or the locker room afterwards and were like, dude, yeah, you missed that, but we saw what you did during the game. Like, you're good with us. But I had so much blowback, and we were talking about it earlier off the podcast, but you try and push out the noise. You try and push out the Twitter comments and the Instagram comments. But people care so much about sports and the outcome of the game that a lot of times they let their emotions get the better of them. And so there was a lot of comments that I shouldn't have read that I took to heart that I really shouldn't have taken to heart, because it was like, who is this guy on the couch? You know?
They could never even kick half the distance.
Right. So it was low, and that was where I had to really learn. Luckily, it happened pretty early in my career, but I had to learn how to navigate, the lows that come with, underperforming as well. And it's so human of us. Like, all of us mess up. All of us have, make big mistakes. And, so like it's so human of us, and I should have not made it as big of a deal as I did, but it was definitely a great learning experience that set me up for future failures that I experienced.
Okay, when it comes to the different worlds of college football, NFL football, and professional ski racing, what do you think are the main characteristics or life skills that you walked away from those experiences?
I mean, ski racing is so unique in the sense that you travel the world, you're in some of the most beautiful places, and you never ski the same course twice. Conditions are always different. Snow conditions, weather, the course set. And so you learn how to navigate change, which is something I'm not and have not been good at. And you learn how to adapt to situations. And the thing is, you could inspect your run. You slide down before you race, and you look at where the gates are and pick your line and make sure that you're looking. And then all of a sudden, the wind's blowing or it starts snowing, and you've got to adjust. And so that's what ski racing taught me. And that's one of the most valuable lessons I think you learn from skiing in general, is just how to navigate different conditions, different pitches. You learn how to adapt. With football, it's a little bit different. I mean, of course, there's some weather that you have to deal with, but typically it's the same ball. It's a snap hold. Like, yeah, you're kicking maybe different places on the field, but there's not quite as many variables. But you learn how to zone in. You learn how to go internal a little bit. I know that sounds weird, but when I would have my long kicking streaks, it was because I could clear my mind and I wasn't focused on the outcome. I was focused on the process that made me successful. And I think that's, when I look back at my football career, even my skiing career, it's the times, it's the training, it's the hard work that stand out to me more than like the victories. Mm-hmm. It's the grind, it's enjoying the journey, right? Versus the, enjoying the outcome. And like, there are vast differences. Like, you get to the pros in football, and it's a lot more about your paycheck and who's making what. And whereas in college, it's like nowadays there's a lot of paycheck going on too, but there's a lot more like, you're playing for each other, and you're playing for pride, and you're playing for the school and the name on your back. And So there are differences there, which are, we could have a whole other podcast about how to navigate that. But, you learn how to go inside and self-motivate and understand that your worth isn't what you put, it's not your output on the field or your output on the slopes. Your worth is the way that you carry yourself day in and day out. Your worth is the amount of effort. Your worth is what you're doing when no one's watching you. And so I think those are probably the most valuable lessons.
Thank you. I want to take that because it segues perfectly into this world of youth sports that I want to kind of pick your brain on. You just recently wrote an article for the Salt Lake Tribune, and it was titled, "As a Dad, Coach, and Professional Athlete, It's Time to Rethink Our Approach to Youth Sports." And I loved what you said in it, and I love what you continually post on social media. There's so much to unpack. And the first thing I kind of want to bring up is, to your last point, is the goal. I feel like so often as a parent, I get wrapped up in, well, the goal is to make a high school team, or the goal is to get to play in college. And I think when we wrap so much pressure into that being our goal, that we lose so much of what actually makes participating in these activities special, which is the character strengths that come from it, the grit, the resilience, the discipline, the responsibility, and especially the confidence that come from it. And so as parents, what is your opinion on the goal? What should the goal of youth sports be at its essence?
The goal of youth sports should be exposure to your kids, exposure of failure, success, having to work with a teammate, having to experience, hard physical challenges. It's easy for me to say. I mean, I wrote the article, but it's like I mentioned earlier, the reason my kids are in sports are to learn, to develop, to become holistic human beings that can navigate our world and whatever they might face in sports or in their professional career or in their marriage or with their children. I want them to be equipped with the skills to navigate that successfully. And that's why I have my kids in sports. We live in a world where, an NFL player is put on a pedestal, right? And we all want that for our kids. And having been there in a couple different sports, it's not as glamorous as it looks. And it might not ultimately be what you really want for your kid. And the percentages of your kid getting there are nothing, There are very few kids who make it past high school into college, and very few college athletes that make it past into the NFL. I mean, I just look at myself and, my success in college, you would look at it and go, yep, he's an NFL kicker. He'll be in the NFL for a long time. And did I have the skill set? Yes. Did I have the mindset? Yes. Did I have the opportunity? Sure. But there are a lot more factors than that. There are, what team do you land on? I went to the Bears, and I'm competing with a 9-year veteran who has had very successful careers at other NFL teams. And I'm with a head coach whose philosophy is, if you're not out kicking my veteran that I've brought you in to compete with by this huge amount, I'm going to go with the veteran. And that's his philosophy, and that's a great philosophy. I mean, that's a tried, trusted, true kicker in the NFL. So I don't blame him at all. But you go, okay, well, what other factors are there? Okay, there's the head coach philosophy, there's who you're competing against, there's what team you're on. And then all of a sudden you're cut and you're an NFL free agent competing against 40 other dudes who have been cut and have been in and out of the NFL 3-4 years. And so the chances are just, no matter what your ability is, the chances are just so low. So I go on that tangent because our motivation shouldn't be to teach our kids to become professional athletes. And that's where we're going in youth sports. You look at the egos that are associated with 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old kids because their parents are feeding them this philosophy that I think is absolute garbage. they're paying for, travel teams, and they're putting $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 into their kids to have them have all the best training and travel and this and that. And it's created an environment, a very competitive environment that I think is very unhealthy for kids. And I'd like to see it go back to like the cream is going to rise to the top regardless. And so like, let's make it fun, and let's make it less about us as parents, and let's make it more about the kids and the lessons that they learn through sports.
One of my favorite quotes from your article was, "We're building humans, not just athletes." And I think that, sometimes, like you said, that the parents, the coaches, that we lose sight of that, and it becomes more about ego and about self and about winning. And so I really appreciate you saying that. As a parent myself, I felt like this weird urgency and pressure, like that I feel like is humming and buzzing around in the world, especially of sports, to like have my kid pick their thing by like age 8. So I'm hoping you can talk to us about early specialization versus multi-sport athletes and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an example of a multi-sport athlete, and I think having the ability to transition from skiing to a sport that I never played, a lot of that is because of the activities that I was able to participate in growing up. Not just sports, dance. Well, dance is a sport, I guess, but music, art. Like there's such a pressure right now on kids to peak at 8, 9, 10, and like, you're a football player or you're a soccer player. I mean, I see it in soccer more than anything, because that's where I'm probably most involved in my coaching. I'm involved in skiing, but skiing's a little bit different. It's a sport where it's seasonal. Of course you can go to a summer camp at Mount Hood in Oregon or down to New Zealand or wherever, but it's a seasonal sport that you're focused on becoming a good skier, and then you jump into competition versus becoming very good at competing, if that makes sense. Yeah. Whereas with soccer, I coach a premier team, and I've felt pressure as a coach to go to every tournament possible and to have an extraordinary amount of hours every week training with these kids. And what I've reverted to is I have 6 players on my premier team that also play football during the fall. And I have to trust as a coach that what they're getting out of their football experience is going to impact their soccer experience in a positive way and their soccer development in a positive way. And I truly believe that. I think there's so many good things that you learn from other sports that will eventually show themselves in the primary sport that you choose. And I'm not saying you need to be a multi-sport athlete, until you're 20. But like when I was skiing, I decided to quit soccer when I was 12 after I won world championships, and decided just to focus on skiing. And that lasted for about, a year. And I was ready to quit skiing.
Burnout?
Total burnout.
Yeah.
And I didn't have something to balance it with.
Yeah. And
that's so important. So if we can just do our best to not get caught up in the results of one sport, but instead, find opportunities for our kids to participate in other things. And this is as much on the coaches, I think, as it is on the parents.
Yeah, let's talk about the coaches a little bit. Like, I mean, you're a coach yourself. You've had obviously many coaches in your lifetime. How can a coach best influence and best impact a child?
I think being able to have the hard conversations, but also having the perspective of long-term development.
Yeah.
I have a kid, for example, on my soccer team that I coach right now, who he's a lot like my son Max, actually. He's grown like crazy, doesn't have much control of his limbs. He's a physical kid. He's smart. He understands the game, but he's not quick. He's not fast. And he gets out-competed by the kids his age that are smaller, quicker, faster. and it gets in his head. And I had this conversation with him yesterday where I said, hey, you need to understand that you're a big dog. And at some point in the next 3-4 years, when you have full control of your growth, you are going to be able to compete and run as fast as these other kids. And you are going to be an absolute animal on the soccer field. And you've got to have that confidence right now and keep learning and keep growing in this sport. And I'm going to keep believing in you. And you can't let that get you sad, basically. And that's the long-term perspective that coaches need to have is, hey, like I have across my 2 premier teams, I have 10 kids that I would put up against anyone in the state. But in 3 years, those 10 kids are going to look a lot different because the one that's smaller or the one that's bigger or the one that's maybe quieter and then all of a sudden finds his drive, like there's so much development that's going to take place over the next 5-6 years. You've got to give these kids a chance to explore that and to live in that. And you're not going to be able to identify your elite players at 8, 9, 10 years old. That's crazy.
Yeah. I liked in the article you said be the coach you needed when you were a kid. Did you have pretty influential coaches growing up? Does anyone stand out that comes to mind of having done it right?
I had a very good soccer coach when I decided to come back and play soccer. This was at like 14 years old, who understood that I was a professional skier and that I wasn't going to be in attendance to a lot of practices. And we talked about the consequences of that, but he said, I'm going to give you the opportunities. And he was awesome. And I still see him today. He coaches, I still see him at our 4v4 games. He coaches some teams. And so it's really cool to see him. And then I had a ski coach before I left on my mission who basically gave me the space to be me and wasn't trying to turn me into something I wasn't, and very calm demeanor, but very supportive, very positive. Kind of knew how I would respond to his coaching. He's very conscious of it. And I excelled under him. I mean, it was the results that I had under his coaching and mentorship were out of this world. Whereas I didn't feel like I got that same level of not freedom, but support when I came back from my mission from those coaches I worked with. And then I've always been close. I mean, my dad's been my coach.
Yeah.
Actually, my mom would disagree. My mom coached me my first couple of years in soccer. And she's coached me through like my mission, my education, my music,
all the other in between things,
which arguably is as important as what my dad coached me through sport.
How does that work for you as a parent with your own kids? Like, I cannot teach my kids piano. It's oil and water. It does not work. How does it translate for you and your kids? Are you able to coach their teams, and how does that go for you?
Yeah, I've coached all of them, and they're different. Each of them are different. That's something I've learned in my experience as a coach, going through certifications and really like honing in on my coaching philosophy. It's something that I've learned is how to coach the individual, and I do that even across my team sports, soccer and football. Johnny isn't going to respond the same as Billy, and it's the same with my kids. Like Max, my oldest, does not respond the way that Gus does, the way that Leo does, the way that Lucy does. And so I have to be very conscious. I also have to be very conscious when I'm dad and when I'm coach. Mm-hmm. And I experience that mostly with Gus because I coach his premier soccer team. And I'm an assistant with Max, but he's a goalie. And so there's a little bit more like one-on-one coaching that he and I do together. But I just have to be very conscious of when I need to be playing dad and when I need to be playing coach. And I think I've done a good job of that. At least that's the feedback I've gotten from others. That's not my own ego. But it's the same way with kids. You just have to understand how your kids respond. What motivates them? Do they have the drive? Where do they land in your quadrant? If they're number one, like there's not you just sit back and watch.
Yeah.
And provide the opportunities for them.
Yeah.
If they're two, there might be ways that you can intervene and provide opportunities for them to find that drive. But they're all different.
Yeah. How important is it to you, in terms of motivation, which you were just saying, intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic or external motivation? How important is it to you to model what could be? For me, with my kids and with music, I found that if I can show them kind of the elite level, or if I can show them what their music could open up their horizons to be, we go to concerts, we go to the orchestra, I show them all these different avenues with music. How important has it been for you to kind of model to your kids their sport at different levels?
It's huge. They obviously know about my success at Utah. I ski with them and coach them in skiing, so they know about where I've been in skiing. And I haven't ever wanted that to be like, I want you to be like me. I want you to get to where I was, But by staying in shape, by eating healthily, by modeling a good relationship with my wife, with my faith, I want to ultimately be an example of goodness, you know, and I think it's hard because, like I said, each of them are different. Each of them are motive. Like I could say to Leo, I want you can buy something on Amazon if you score 3 goals, you know, and he's like, he's locked in. He's going to go as hard as he possibly can. Whereas like if I say that to Max, it's like, all right, I don't really care, you know? So like if we talk about extrinsic motivation, but I think modeling, like they see my routine each day. My kids know my values. They know my faith. They see how I treat their mom. They see what I hold as high importance and what I think is unimportant to worry about. And we have these conversations, and I think by modeling it that way, that gives them a pathway. That's
cool. I've personally, in my experience, found that external motivation precedes internal motivation. And so often with my kids, I'm not above doing a bribe like you talked about, like with, each of our kids, they were incentivized by something different. And I was asked one time, like, how I feel about a bribe. And I don't love that word because I think there's a pretty negative connotation with a bribe. It seems to be something that's given to you instead of something that's earned. But the word I do like is an incentive, an external incentive for my kids. Just the other day they were asked to play for a musical number at church. And my kids are like, I don't really want to do that. And we were like, okay, we want you to have this opportunity to feel that high that comes from serving and participating in that way. If you do it, we'll let you all go to Boondocks. And so that was the incentive that they could earn. And then we all went to Boondocks together. But that little external motivation, I think one day enough of those opportunities lead to internal self-motivating practices. And so I love that you shared that. I wanted to ask you about, there's so much more that I could ask you about, but I want to ask you how you and Megan approach lessons with your kids. Like, how do you balance their childhood and their friendships and your family dinner time, like that precious time and family vacations with all the different things you're doing? How many activities do you do at once? How do you guys navigate that?
We're still learning, I think, is probably the best answer. Our kids love to do stuff. They love to live. They love to be involved in activities. And so we have a number of things. Like Lucy dances, she does tumbling, she plays soccer. We ski. All my kids play soccer, boys play soccer and football, and they all play the cello, and Lucy plays the violin. So I have all 3 of my boys playing the cello and taking piano lessons. So it's a lot. And what I've learned is when there's conflict, we ask them what they want to do.
Yeah.
And there are some non-negotiables, like, hey, if there's a soccer practice or a football game, like you're committed to your team, we'd like to see at the football game. That's what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a hierarchy, but if there's a football game and a soccer game at the same time, we challenge them to make that decision. And it's been great because it's given us a look into their brains a little bit as to what they like to do at that time and in that moment. And I don't think there's a perfect balance. We're definitely in a stage of life where it would be ideal to have each kid in one sport and be able to sit down and eat dinner all together every night. Like that, I would love nothing more than that. And Megan, to her credit, we probably sit down and eat meals together 4 times a week, which is awesome. And I think is a very important staple in our family. But with that being said, we also are realistic and understand that we have 4 kids and they all want to play sports, and Megan and I don't want to selfishly take away opportunities from our kids because we think that they're doing too much. Mm-hmm. And so there's a balance. I think probably the advice I would give to parents is have frank conversations with coaches. I think it comes back to that. And that's what we've done with, I'll just use Lucy as an example. She is a phenomenal athlete. Like she's a number one. She's
a one.
She is a one. And it's like, I don't have to tell her a thing. Her piano's practiced, her homework's done, and she wants to go pick up the dog poop in the backyard. She's on it. And so I go to her soccer coach and I say, hey, Lucy's a phenomenal dancer and it's what she wants to do. She's also a very good soccer player. But there will be times throughout the year where her dance is going to take precedent over, her dance practice will take precedence over soccer practice. If that's a problem, let us know. We understand there will probably be some consequences associated with that, no problem. But just know that that's where we're coming from. And it's like, yeah, great, thank you, appreciate the honest conversation. And luckily her coach is like, I love it because she sees the value in having her in dance and how that brings, an added value to soccer. But that's what I would tell parents is have the conversation with coaches. And guess what? If your 7-year-old or your 8-year-old or your 9-year-old is getting punished for missing practice because they're playing soccer or they're playing basketball or whatever, they have a music concert, like maybe that they shouldn't be working with that coach. Maybe you should find another team for them because that's not a pressure that you as a parent should have to experience, and that's not a pressure that your kid should have to experience. That's completely unfair and goes against so much science.
I feel like that's something as a parent I've had to kind of have my eyes opened to this year is that I'm the boss, or like I'm in control of what they do and don't do, a lot of times the rules of certain teams or certain coaches have been dictating our entire life. And at the end of the day, I've had to sit back and realize I'm the parent here. I need to be working with my husband and with my kids to figure out what really is going to serve us best in the long run. We were very, very overscheduled up until this last year, kind of trying to do it all, to be it all. And none of my girls are ones. And I love that for them. My son, Hank, is, I believe, a 1 in football. He's a hard worker, but he also shows a great little natural talent. But I just came to find there was a lot that I felt like we were missing in the in-between, just shuffling kids everywhere. And where I didn't have my girls in the driver's seat wanting to do it, I had to be like, okay, where are we going to focus and prioritize? And so what I've kind of been thinking a lot about this year is prioritizing activities with lifetime value. And you're like a huge testament to that with skiing. Lifetime value activities are things like skiing, swimming, biking, running, tennis, golf. And then for us, it's like especially music. These are things that they can take with them forever. How do you guys prioritize, or how do you see those type of activities as with a lifetime value as being important?
I think they're the most important. That you can always come back to a sport. And I had this conversation with my son, Max. He's not having as much fun as when he plays soccer and when he skis. And so he's like, hey, Dad, next year, I show up to football tired because of soccer. I show up to soccer tired because of football. I think maybe I want to just focus on soccer and not play football. And I said, hey, and play flag football. And I was like, okay, we can replace football with flag football if that's what you want to do. Whatever you want to do, buddy. And so by eliminating that himself, that's his own driven, decision. He can now focus on what he wants to do. We have time. We could have time to go bike. We could have time to go run. Skiing is a non-negotiable for us just because I drive that home. But with all that being said, like he now has the time, the space to develop elsewhere in his life versus just in those sports. And that's what, like you said, like we love to drive home what we think is important, and oftentimes we overschedule it. And I think that's okay, because in 2-3 years he can go back to tackle football.
Yeah.
And what he's learned from whatever he's filled his time up with in the meantime is going to be no problem.
Yeah.
It's like me. Like I said, of course, I'm not going out there and playing linebacker at a collegiate level, but I do think between the skills that I learned from soccer and skiing, I could have been a different position than just a kicker. I had the mentality and the physicality to go out and play something different. So I don't think you lose. That's the fear. I think when we ultimately break it down, it's parents' fear that their kid is going to get behind, and so they overschedule them, and they try and put them in everything, and they try and pay for every private this and that. And it's like, hey, at the end of the day, like you're less is more, and maybe not less is more, but focusing on, like you mentioned, activities that are lifelong, that will add value to your life versus adding value to your momentary ego, are key. They're critical.
And I hope that's what people take away from this conversation. If they only take away one thing, I hope that parents remember that they get to make these decisions, and that they can't be based out of fear. They can't be based out of falling behind or not being enough. We as parents, we are in the driver's seat. We have the control. And I love your mentality around it, that if we are doing activities, we're never too late. If we're participating in multiple things, that we're picking up little skills in every different thing that we participate in, and that we're never going to be too late to start something new, to try something, to pick something back up. I just love that. I wanted to circle back around to well-rounded athletes. My son, Hank, he's a football guy. He's that's what he's taken to. And the other day we were asked to do this musical number, and Hank said, "Mom, I'm not singing. I'm not a singer. I'm a football player." And Brady chimed in, and he said, "Hank, you know what the coolest thing is that you can be a football player on Saturday, and on Sunday you can go participate in the musical number." And I think that's what's so cool, is the coolest football players are also musicians. The coolest musicians are also able to go jump into a sport. And having that well-roundedness, I don't know, I still use it myself all the time. We're playing pickleball, we're playing tennis, I use these lifelong skills today all the time. And so I think it's something that you've been a great example of, is investing in the skiing, investing in the things that have a lifetime value you still can enjoy and bring to your future kids, which I love. I want to talk to you about quitting. How do we let our kids quit? How do we handle this?
All the hard-hitting questions today. I think it depends. I mean, if you've put your kid in a sport that they didn't want to play, let's just say, or given them an instrument that they just do not want to play, I think that's on you as a parent. Now, with that being said, I would hope the conversation would have been, let's just say a sport. When I played soccer, I played for a coach that I did not like, and I wanted to quit when I was 11, 10 or 11. And my mom said, "That's fine. If you want to quit, the season ends in 4 weeks. Okay, you'll give everything you got to your teammates, because it's not just your coach. If you quit now, you would be letting down the rest of your teammates, and that's not fair to them. You committed to this team." Yeah. And that was a great lesson for me to learn, that there are times where I've committed myself to things that I shouldn't have. And there's there's a value in seeing those things through.
Okay, one of our last questions here is, how can we make and foster confidence in our kids? I oftentimes see parents will focus on the outcome, oh, you did so good, you won. But how can we focus on the effort that goes into the performances? And how do you think that helps foster a sense of confidence?
Just celebrating the progress, celebrating the journey. That's one thing I focus on a lot with my soccer team. We play a year up, and by playing a year up, we're not the fastest, we're not the strongest. Oftentimes, we don't win the game. It's close. It's a battle. It's 3-5, or sometimes it's a blowout and we lose 7-0. So what I try and focus on with those players are like, I don't care about the score. The score doesn't matter. I want you guys to see what we're doing here. We are pushing ourselves as players to compete against bigger, stronger kids, so that when the time comes for us to go to a tournament, or by the time comes for us to play 11v11, because we're playing 9v9 right now, we're ready to go and we're prepared. And I want you guys to see the long-term vision. And that's the approach that we've taken with our kids. Let's just say with cello, for example. We have a great cello teacher. She's amazing. And with it's been great because she coaches she teaches the same way, where they're going through Suzuki, and she breaks down the songs, and then as they practice them throughout the week, and she gets back with them, every Friday, it's like, holy cow, I can tell you've been practicing. This sounds so good. It's not perfect. We might be missing this, or we might not be stretching quite enough, but this sounds so much better than last week. And I can tell you've been practicing. Great job. Keep it up. And then my kids get home from school, and the first thing they do is, I need to go downstairs and practice my cello, because I'm seeing the progress. And what I think it ultimately comes down to is, like, give your kids the feedback. Sometimes we're absent-minded as parents, and we only give the feedback after the result, after the game. And instead, the focus should be giving feedback on, like, those little wins that they have throughout the week, or those little wins they have throughout their journey.
I think that's so huge. Sometimes we'll have parents say, oh, go play that really fast song that you always love to play for grandma and grandpa. And I think that subtly kind of chips away at a child's confidence if we're not careful to only praise the fast, the rigorous, the super polished songs. I love what you said. And the little celebrations can come all along the way, even when it's squeaky. I know we don't have a violinist at our house yet, but even when it's squeaky, even when it doesn't sound right, the praise is what eventually leads the kids to have the confidence to want to keep going. It sounds like your teacher is doing a fantastic job of that. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much. I feel like there's a lot that we can learn as parents in navigating this world of youth sports from you, Andy. So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to just ask, as this last and final question, what do you hope people will say about Andy Phillips, both on and off the field? What do you hope your legacy will be?
So it's my life goal to always be as involved with my kids as I can be. From the second we had Max, I try I'm not perfect at it, but anytime he has asked me to go jump in the waves with him, or go do this or that with him, I've tried my best to never have an excuse to say no. And I know that that's not realistic all the time. Like, I have work that I have to get done, or I'm on a phone call, or whatever it might be. But that's kind of the legacy I want to leave with my kids. Is I think the biggest impact that we can have as parents is being involved with our kids and making our kids our best friends, and talking with them about the hard things, and having those priceless experiences. And we oftentimes are so distracted by unimportant things, in my opinion, that take away from us. That's the legacy I want to leave with my kids, is A, be as involved and as present and as live this life to its fullest. And then B would be, don't ever tell yourself that you can't do something. I'm a prime example of that. Of if you put your mind to something and you have the drive and you are willing to adapt and sacrifice, you can accomplish whatever you want. And I try and live that every day. I'm not perfect at that, but that's probably what I would say.
I think that's a great legacy. I think what it ultimately comes down to for me, whether that be music, whether that be sports, it allows us as parents this amazing opportunity to not only connect with our kids, but it allows us to have time devoted to them. I think about so many times driving to piano lessons, driving to sports games, the fun ritual that we have on Saturdays after sports games, going to grab a treat. I just think that all of it can be spelled out in time with our kids to connect with them and to help them grow into the people that we want them to be. So, Andy, thank you so much for being here. I wanted to have you tell us, where can we find you? I love following you online. So plug your social media, please, so that more people can follow you and get more great tips like this.
Well, if you want a fun follow, go to my Instagram at Andy Phillips. If you want some more hot takes, you can go find me on Twitter at Andy D. Phillips. That's all the social that I'm on.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you sharing your voice. We appreciate your perspective. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You've been listening to More Than Musicians. Thanks for being here. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and anywhere you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps more people find us. And if you or someone you know has a story you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at morethanmusicians@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with another episode. See you then.